Welcome to the Young Turks. Fun and exciting show for you guys today, as usual. It's a Monday, and we are loaded with stories, as usually happens in the Trump administration over the weekend. But it includes a story that happened just today. One of his former aides went on TV 3 different times and seemed to implicate Trump in crazy interviews. So we'll break that down for you a little bit later in the program. There is a lot of stories coming out about the investigation, and they're coming out rapidly. As I told you guys, I think that the Trump administration is going to devolve really, really quickly. I think it's happening right in front of our eyes. I don't think that developments here should be understated. They are huge, and so I'll get to a lot of that a little bit later in the program. And then, of course, unfortunately, that is another common story that is, I was going to say, been haunting us the last couple of weeks and months. The Democratic Party attacking its own. They've attacked yet another progressive. So I will tell you about that a little bit later in the program. And then we have not one but two, arguably three child predator stories, unfortunately, in the show, including Kentucky considering whether they should let children get married or not. So that's apparently an open debate. And then Facebook asking people whether it's okay to have grown men ask for 14-year-olds' nude pictures. So what in the world, right? I'm thinking of changing the name of the show to What in the World? Or more simply, what just happened? Anyway, that could be a fun show on the network. Speaking of the network, tomorrow night, Tuesday elections in Texas. So we had Arizona's 8th district elections to start off the campaign season in 2018 last week, but that was a special election. Tomorrow night is the beginning of that regular course of business, 2018 elections, the primaries in Texas. There are 7 Justice Democrats that are running, including Laura Moser, who's been attacked by the Democratic Party, even though she is a Democrat, or perhaps because she is a progressive. Beto O'Rourke looking to take on Ted Cruz, so massive night. So tomorrow we're gonna go 3 to 5 Pacific, 6 to 8 Eastern, normally Young Turks show, and then go live as well with the election night coverage right afterwards at 8 o'clock Eastern. The Texas election coverage begins. Okay, now I got stories for you guys. Let's go over here. So Roy Moore, he's back in the news. It's for, I would say, unfortunate reasons, but I'm kind of partial to this story. I like that he's in this kind of situation. As HuffPost explains, former Republican Senate candidate Roy Moore has asked supporters for financial assistance to defend against a defamation lawsuit brought by an Alabama woman who accused him of sexually abusing her when she was 14 years old. Well, look, she didn't get justice back then, and what he did to her, based on the allegations, could put you away for a long, long time if it was a criminal case. Now, there has been no criminal case, so she's going after him civilly, and now he is crying. And asking you guys to chip in. I would wish him good luck for that campaign, but I wish him nothing but the worst of luck with it. A donation site for Moore has raised $32,200 out of a $250,000 goal. As of Saturday, he has been asking for money since at least January, when he sent email to supporters requesting contributions. So we went to his Facebook post, and I just wanted to quote for you a couple things that he wrote there. He figured out who was the enemy. Not the girls that he abused when they were underage. No, that's not the issue. Not the people he's facing in court. No, it turns out it was gays, lesbians, of course, and transgenders. They have joined forces, according to Roy Moore, with those who believe in abortion, sodomy, and destruction of all that we hold dear. Unless we stand together, we will lose our country. So unless Roy Moore has enough money to pay for his legal fees for women he might have abused when they were 14-year-old kids, the country will be gone. We'll lose it. We'll lose it entirely. And it is, of course, because of the sodomites. But to some people in this country, that sentence makes sense. Okay, he says, my resources have been depleted and I have struggled to make ends meet, but I have not lost my faith in our God, who is our true source of strength and will never leave or forsake us. Well, Roy, problem solved. There you go. You know what I got for you? Thoughts and prayers. Okay, and I'm sure that your followers have lots of thoughts and prayers. Shouldn't that do the trick? I mean, you told us all this time, God will provide. And you said right there that he's a true source of strength and will never leave you. Wonderful, problem solved. Look, I'm not the one saying that God's got magic potions and spells that could help folks. You are. So why don't you conjure one up? A little bit later, final quote for you guys. He says, however, given all of his troubles, I will trust God that he will allow truth to prevail against the unholy forces of evil behind their attack. Now, by the way, let's just review. Molesting a 14-year-old girl, not the forces of evil. That same 14-year-old as a grown woman looking for justice, that apparently is the forces of evil. And somehow connected to transgender people. Okay, anyway, Roy, you don't have to thank me. You don't have to send any money to the Young Turks or become a member at tytnetwork.com/join. Roy, I got it for you. Pray to the guy above, and voila, it'll magically be solved. I'm just reminding you of the solutions you insist are true in the world. Good luck with that. Again, I'd wish you bad luck, but it's pretty irrelevant. Either way, you're not going to get the money. Okay. So now we go to a story that is amazing. That looks like, I should point this way, Assad state of affairs. When we have a story about Bashar al-Assad, that's going to work just as well. But it is a sad state of affairs. All right, let me tell you all about it. Fascinating news story out of New Yorker, Jane Mayer, one of the best journalists we have in the country, breaking a story about a second Steele memo. Now, if you don't remember, Steele's the guy who wrote the first dossier about Trump and what he might have done with the Russians. That had one sensational story about golden showers in a hotel room. Apparently, in this new Jane Mayer piece, we find out that one of the guys who wrote it didn't even want to include that because, true or not true, his word, he would over-sensationalize it when the more pedestrian parts of the memo were far more important about Trump aides and Trump's campaign's connections to the Russians. Now, if you read that memo, at least 4 parts of it have already been proven to be correct and are now beyond dispute, including very important things like Carter Page, a Trump campaign official meeting with Russians in Moscow. Now, it turns out there was a second memo written, and that's already huge news right there. And wait till you get a load of what's in it. Turns out the Russians, if you believe these allegations, helped to pick our Secretary of State. Now, there's very good reasons to believe it, but let me give you the full context. Mayer explains, one subject that Steele is believed to have discussed with Mueller's investigators is a memo that he wrote in late November 2016 after his contract with Fusion had ended. That's the people that he wrote the original dossier for. This memo, which did not surface publicly with the others, is shorter than the rest and is based on one source described as, quote, a senior Russian official. Okay, now, if you're a Robert Mueller, you want to find out who that senior Russian official is, and perhaps more importantly for our purposes here in the US, who they were talking to on the other side. So we'll get to that in a second. The official said that he was merely relaying talk circulating in the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but what he'd heard was astonishing. People were saying that the Kremlin had intervened to block Trump's initial choice of Secretary of State, Mitt Romney. Well, if that is true, that is indeed astonishing. Now, it might not be astonishing to you guys if you watch the Young Turks, because I told you from the get-go that Rex Tillerson was clearly chosen because the Russians wanted him to lift the sanctions. I said that from the day that, not that he was announced, probably before he was announced, when he was being considered. I said, why in the world would you have the former CEO of ExxonMobil be the Secretary of State? That makes no sense, except for the $500 billion deal that Russia had with ExxonMobil, and that's what the sanctions blocked. So we'll get back to Rex Tillerson in a second, but let's continue about Romney. The memo said that the Kremlin through unspecified channels, had asked Trump to appoint someone who would be prepared to lift Ukraine-related sanctions and who would cooperate on security issues of interest to Russia, such as the conflict in Syria. Now, if Trump actually did this, look, I don't care about the word treason and whether that crime can be pursued or not, but obviously he would be gone. To let another country, any country, pick our Secretary of State so that the sanctions could be lifted on that country. Do I have to bother explaining why that would be horrific and not acceptable for the President of the United States to do? So, okay. If Mueller proves this, game over, completely over. President Trump is obviously out. I imagine he would resign before he was impeached, but prison would also be something that would be seriously considered. I don't know if it would go to that just because of how deeply embarrassed the whole country would be, given that our president is working apparently at the behest of another country. Now you can say, hey, it hasn't been proven yet, and it hasn't been proven in a court of law, but this guy's been right over and over. In the beginning, when I saw the Steele memo, I was very skeptical about the whole thing. You could watch old clips of me being skeptical about it. But after it was proven right 4 different times, and now we're on to this, and it matches the logic of what we have seen in public, and he's got a source, well, that's a lot of ands. We'll see what Mueller comes up with, which is the most important part. But let's keep going here. In any case, on December 13, 2016, Mayor reports, Trump gave Rex Tillerson, the CEO of ExxonMobil, the job. The choice was a surprise to most and a happy one in Moscow, because Tillerson's business ties with the Kremlin were long-standing and warm. I detailed for you guys those ties about a year ago when Tillerson was first picked. He's very good friends with both Putin. He's gotten an award from the Russian government. Rex Tillerson, our Secretary of State, has. Why? Because they were making business deals regarding oil. So as a businessman, I guess that makes sense. As our Secretary of State, less sense. Anyway, he also has very good ties with the major oil companies in Russia. And one of the guys who had the sanctions put on him, one of the Russian oligarchs, said that he was looking forward to come back to America so he could ride motorcycles with Rex Tillerson. So in 2011, by the way, he also, Tillerson did, brokered a historic partnership between ExxonMobil and Rosneft. That's the one that I've been telling you about for a year now. That's the one that was blocked by the sanctions, and both ExxonMobil and Russia was heavily motivated to lift and then have that deal go through. Now, here's another interesting part of the Mayor piece in the New Yorker. The White House declined to comment about any communications that Trump team may have had with Russia on the subject. Really? You couldn't get a denial on that issue? So a reporter calls the White House and says, we have a memo saying that you let another country pick our Secretary of State. And they go, well, we declined to comment on that particular issue. What? No, if you didn't do it, a massive denial is in order. Are you insane that we let some other country pick our Secretary of State? Of course we didn't. Would be the correct response to that. No comment? Declined to comment about any communications that the Trump team may have had with Russia on the subject. I know that Mueller's on their trail, and so they're now worried about lying to the authorities, etc. But that appears to be very telling. All right, that's interesting. Now, one more for Mayor. After the election, Congress imposed additional sanctions on Russia in retaliation for its interference. But Trump and Tillerson have resisted enacting them. So there's the one thing about how it looks like, based on this information from a source within the Russian government, they say, no, not Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney was very harsh on Russia when he ran against Obama in 2012, so they don't want him under any circumstance. But yes, Rex Tillerson, he's a good friend of ours, and we have I say $500 billion deal, but the revenue from that deal would actually was estimated to be $9 trillion, not billion, trillion. That's a lot of reasons to collaborate with someone. Instead, we'll take Rex Tillerson. They don't deny it. And since then, but do you have evidence that Tillerson has helped the Russians and Trump has helped the Russians? Well, both of them say we will not put the sanctions in place. Even though Trump signed it into law, we're just not going to do it. We're not going to do it now. We didn't do it before. We're not going to do it later. We're just not going to do it. In fact, a separate story unrelated to this also broke today. The State Department has spent $0 of the $120 million allocated by Congress to combat foreign efforts to influence US elections. Who's the State Department run by? Oh, right, Rex Tillerson. Well, what a happy coincidence again for Russia that the Secretary of State that they might have picked themselves has decided that he's not going to combat Russian interference in our elections. Despite the massive budget, HuffPost reports, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson has done little to thwart a sweeping influence campaign by the Russian government, and an office tasked with countering such efforts has no employees that even speak Russian. They're not even pretending. It's comical. Tillerson himself has continued to doubt the ability of his department to combat Russia, and just last month said that if Moscow wanted to meddle, it was, quote, going to find ways to do that. Well, that's really encouraging. Here's our Secretary of State going, what do you want me to do about it? If they're gonna meddle, they're gonna meddle. Well, we gave you $120 million to do something about it. He's not going to, though. Which begs the question, who does he work for? So that also goes to the president. Now, speaking of which, let's go to Dan Coats. He works for the president. He's appointed by Donald Trump, huge right-winger, massive conservative. Now, director of national intelligence. So what does he have to say about whether there's Russian interference? Well, under Trump, you'd imagine he'd say, that's a hoax, or nope. Here is Trump's own director of national intelligence saying, quote, "We expect Russia to continue using propaganda, social media, false flag personas, sympathetic spokespeople, and other means to influence to try to exacerbate social and political fissures in the United States. There should be no doubt that Russia perceives its past efforts as successful and views the 2018 US midterm elections as a potential target for Russian influence operations." Hey, Russia, you should have also told Trump who to pick as his director of national intelligence. Because Dan Coats, although he's deeply conservative there and picked by Donald Trump, is being principled and saying, yes, of course they interfered and they're looking to do it again. I don't know if this is basically beseeching Tillerson and other parts of the government, for God's sake, will you do something already? And by do something, we don't mean war. Certainly I don't mean further hostilities. I mean, can you take precautions to make sure that the voting booths are protected? Can you do standard things to make sure that our elections have integrity and that we can count on them and that it is in fact our democracy? But if a foreign government is picking our cabinet officials, that is not what I would call a healthy democracy. That is what I would call deeply illegal and something that needs to be addressed immediately. So we'll all find out soon enough, I hope, when Mueller concludes his investigation. And by the way, if he looks into all of this and decides, no, that memo was wrong, he'll let us know. And if he thinks it's right, he better have a lot of evidence if he's going to try to go after the president of the United States. And he's a very careful prosecutor. So if he does in fact say this happened, my guess is that he will have overwhelming evidence. And by the way, just because the case hasn't happened, there is no indictment of Trump yet, doesn't mean that evidence does not exist. There is a lot of evidence already in public. They will not enforce the sanctions. They will not try to combat Russia's meddling in our elections. They refuse to spend the money. They refuse to take any actions. And Tillerson, we know for a fact, was a very good ally of the Russian government and wanted those sanctions lifted. He was on the record on that. And he was picked when the CEO of an oil company makes no sense at all as Secretary of State with no foreign policy experience. It's right in front of your eyes if you care to see it. Okay, I got to take a break. When we come back, a little bit more in terms of Donald Trump attacking his enemies, somewhat related to this investigation, but then the Democrats, at least the establishment guys, go on the warpath against progressives. We'll tell you where they're doing that, who they're doing that against, and how that's turning out when we come back.
Corey, did you hear the news?
Yeah?
You know what we have to do, right?
Let's do it.
Somebody, and I wouldn't lose any voters, okay? It's like incredible.
Hey, bud, you still there?
Say, Trump will
Yeah, I had the dream again. Yeah. No, I was in the rain this time. It was pretty cute.
All right, back on the Young Turks. Okay, I gotta find a clean way to read this tweet. Ruth Iverson tweets, my life used to be awesome until some person I don't know had gay intercourse. That's one way of putting it. Then everything went to hell. I mean, it is kind of funny, isn't it? My life was going okay until someone else had the wrong kind of sex somewhere else completely, having nothing to do with me. And then my life went poorly, and it must be their fault. But people actually believe that. It's the sodomites. Okay, anyway. Chad Landrum says, how dare Russia pick our Secretary of State? Goldman Sachs must be so pissed. That's an excellent point, Chad, and one we've made often as well, which is it's terrible for Russia to interfere, but corporations interfere in elections every time, every election, in every level. And so if you don't know, Barack Obama basically had his cabinet handed to him by Citigroup. He took every single name on the list, handed to him by top executives of Citigroup except one. So, but out of our elections, Russia. That's our Wall Street's job. Okay, and then finally a YouTube super chat. We've got Artificial Morphosman writing in. Please look into Congress voting to lift Dodd-Frank regulations on Wall Street tomorrow. Thanks. We're a little bit ahead of you. TYT Investigates just published a story about that. I will probably present that on the show tomorrow for you guys. But check out our website, tytnetwork.com, and you'll see that story. It's about, unfortunately, how a Democrat has worked with them as well to lift those regulations. Oy. Okay, all right, let's go over here and do some more stories. So Donald Trump, of course, as usual, tweeting things that make no sense. In this case, he's furious about how the Russian investigation is going because it is going well. And as they close in on him, he makes less and less sense. So he's wildly attacking the FBI, the former administration, trying to somehow in his own mind prove bias by them so that will vitiate their results. But if they have the evidence on you, nobody's going to go back and be like, yeah, but what did they say about Gerald Ford? But he doesn't understand that concept. All right, so he tweets out, why did the Obama administration start an investigation into the Trump campaign with zero proof of wrongdoing long before the election in November, wanted to discredit so crooked Hillary would win, unprecedented, bigger than Watergate, plus Obama did nothing about Russian meddling. But wait, which one is it? The investigation that the so-called Obama administration started, in reality, though Obama found out about it later and basically did not make it public. But anyway, it was about Trump and the people on his campaign perhaps communicating with Russian officials. So how can you turn around by the end of the tweet, it's not even the next tweet or the next day, by the end of the same tweet and say, he did nothing about Russian meddling? No, you just said he did something about Russian meddling. He started an investigation of you. As well he should have, because that's who the Russians were apparently, it appears from the outside, working with. What else would he have done? The fact that that is logically inconsistent doesn't even occur to him, because that phrase has the word logic in it, which Donald Trump has never met and has no interest in meeting. And if he wanted to discredit you so that Hillary Clinton would win, wouldn't he have made that investigation public before the election rather than keep it secret? In fact, he wouldn't. He wouldn't publicly acknowledge the investigation into whether the Russians meddled, and in fact, people are now A, furious about that, B, now you're using it as an excuse. It's preposterous. In a separate story from HuffPost, there was a reference to a recent story about McCabe, who was the person who recently left the FBI, but before we get to that, I wanted to go to the New Yorker story about how Obama would not act. So Obama administration officials, according to Jane Mayer at the New Yorker, were mindful of the Hatch Act, which forbids government employees to use their positions to influence political elections. The State Department officials didn't know who was funding Steele's research, but they could see how politically explosive it was, so they backed away. Besides which, it's not an open dispute. We know that they didn't say anything before the election. We also know it was because Mitch McConnell said, if you dare say anything about this real investigation by the FBI, we will pretend it is political. Now Trump in a tweet says, it was political and I can't believe you didn't say anything. But it was against you. If he had said something, you would have accused him of meddling in the election 1,000 times more. His stupidity knows no bounds. All right, so now let's go to Andrew McCabe, because that's the guy that Trump keeps targeting and in fact ran him out of the FBI. Well, it turns out this guy who was supposed to be so biased against Trump during the election that he ordered that investigation and didn't do enough about Hillary. No, it's the opposite. So now we go to Ryan Riley at HuffPost. Trump and his supporters have used the fact that former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe's wife ran for a state Senate seat as a Democrat to paint him as a Democratic partisan out to get Trump. They have indeed done that. So what's the reality? Trump and his allies have suggested that McCabe leaked information that hurt Trump and helped Clinton. But the Inspector General's forthcoming report is set to reveal the opposite. McCabe authorized leaks that damaged Clinton and aided Trump. So tiny bit more detail on that. The Inspector General, who has been looking into the FBI's handling of the probe since before Trump's inauguration, will criticize McCabe for authorizing discussions with a Wall Street Journal reporter on October 30th, 2016, a story that suggested President Barack Obama's Justice Department was improperly pressuring the FBI to drop a probe of the Clinton Foundation. So that was just basically a week before the election. Andrew McCabe leaks a story saying Obama won't let the FBI go after Hillary Clinton. that is deeply damaging to Hillary Clinton, completely helps Donald Trump. So if he's part of a plot to get Donald Trump, why did he do the opposite? And was the Obama administration actually pressuring them on that? That is an open question, and one I'm looking forward to seeing the Inspector General report on when it becomes public, because I think there's a good case to be made there. The people within the Obama administration claimed at the time, no, we don't want to seem like we're interfering in the election. That is why looking into the Clinton Foundation this late into the election season is problematic. Well, to be fair to the Obama administration, they also didn't reveal that the FBI was looking into Donald Trump. So they didn't reveal either side, or they didn't want to reveal either side. But the FBI did reveal one side, and one side only, the side against Hillary Clinton, the investigation into her Clinton Foundation. Now, I think they should have investigated both the Clinton Foundation and Trump's connections to Russia, and I think they should have announced both. Instead, it wound up being one-sided and to the benefit of Donald Trump, no matter what he screams on Twitter today in a desperate attempt to avoid both justice and sanity. Sanity left the building a long time ago, but he's still on Twitter. Okay. Now, let's go to the Democrats. So the DCCC is supposed to help Democrats running for office in the House. And they do if you agree to their rules. The Young Turks broke a story about a memo they sent to a lot of the candidates saying that you got to spend 75% of your money on paid communication. Then they sent them a list of consultants, coincidentally happened to be linked to the people who work at the DCCC who they should use to spend that money. And now they're going around the country attacking progressives who have not been preordained as their pick. What does the DCCC demand when they're looking to back you? One, that you have a lot of money. Either you're a millionaire or billionaire yourself, or you know a lot of millionaires and can raise a lot of money. Do they ask you what your policy positions are? No. Do they care if you're more progressive? Well, they might, but in the wrong direction. But they don't even bother asking in the beginning. And the second thing they want is to make sure that if you have that money, you're going to spend it with their friends. So some of the progressive candidates have actually raised more money than the establishment candidates. But since it's not going to the consultant friends of the DCCC, they are furious about it. So they attacked a progressive in Texas, Laura Moser. She's got her primary coming up tomorrow. Be very interesting to see what happens there, and I want to tell you a little bit about that at the end of this story. But it turns out now they're attacking another progressive in Pennsylvania. His name is Greg Edwards. He's also a Justice Democrat, which means he does not take corporate cash. The people in Washington do not like that. Their bread and butter is corporate cash. So look at this, lo and behold, they're against Greg Edwards as well. So let's find out how. Now we go to the Washington Post, Dave Weigel with another good story here. He says the drama in Pennsylvania is centered on Greg Edwards, a pastor running for a newly drawn swing seat in the Lehigh Valley. On Thursday, he told the Washington Post that the DCCC had approached the local Democrats to ask whether he could be persuaded to seek another office. Let me be clear, a lower office. You are not welcome here. A pastor running as a Democrat would appear to be a good story, unless, of course, the pastor was uncorrupted. Edwards says, as far as I know, they only targeted one candidate to leave this race, the most progressive candidate, the only candidate of color. Their inability to understand why that's fundamentally wrong says everything. I want to come back to that reasoning in a second, but more from Weigel here. The DCCC pushed back on Edwards' claims, saying that the unique situation in Pennsylvania where courts struck down a gerrymandered map and created 18 new districts just weeks before parties' primaries prompted them to ask several candidates if they might run instead for offices further down the ballot. Okay, before I get to why they might do that and whether that's legitimate or not, let's figure out if they actually did do that. So Tim Persico, a DCCC operative, had indeed asked local Democrats if Edwards or ex-Allentown solicitor Susan Wild might leave the crowded primary to run for state senate, so a lower seat than United States representative, which is what they're running for. And Meredith Kelly, the communications director for the DCCC, doesn't quite deny it. She says at the end that it's not exactly right, but let me give you her full quote. She says, Pennsylvania's congressional maps were just completely redrawn, and it's very typical for candidates to recalculate their campaign plans as a result. As a Pennsylvania native, Tim knows the importance of local politics in the state and went to Allentown for an early on-the-ground assessment of the political landscape in this newly drawn district, particularly regarding the multiple Democratic candidates' next steps. This is completely normal. He did not, however, ask anyone to drop out of the congressional race. I think that she phrased it a little bit wrong there. If she had said he didn't demand that anyone drop out of the race, he didn't force them to drop out of the race, that would be technically correct. But it appears he literally asked them, hey, do you mind dropping out of the race and going to further down the ballot? In fact, here's more confirmation. David Marshall, who runs the Pennsylvania Democrats State Senate Campaign Committee, said that Persico had only asked them, quote, if we'd be interested in any of these folks if they dropped into down ballot races. Well, that appears to be a confirmation. He might think that that's perfectly normal, but that is a confirmation. And Greg Edwards, the candidate, responds, I just say that the DCCC got caught red-handed and admitted as much to us. And apparently they did talk to the campaign, and the Edwards campaign took it as an admission as well that they were trying to get him out of the race. Now, does it make sense or does it not make sense? Look, some of these races are crowded. They all have different dynamics depending on the states. And if you have a runoff primary, sometimes they say, well, if there's too many Democrats in the race, it'll help the few Republicans get into the runoff. I don't really believe in that either, but that's an argument that could be made. But the main reason they do it, especially in a place like Pennsylvania, is they think, no, we want the guy who is most electable. Now, I think they genuinely believe that. They also want a guy who's going to funnel money to them, but I think that they have gotten themselves to believe that they're looking for someone who's electable. The problem comes in the next step, which is their assumptions about who's electable. So there's several different layers to it. For them, there is no other layer. There's one layer, basically. How much money do you have, and are you willing to spend it with our consultants? Okay, and because that's their only metric of viability. Then number two layer is, okay, maybe Greg Edwards has more volunteers. Maybe he's got more media attention. Maybe he's winning a straw poll, as now Laura Moser is, right? But they don't look at those metrics, whereas I think they should look at those metrics. And they've been told and now have internalized from the Rahm Emanuels of the world that quote unquote centrists are the ones more likely to win in a district that used to be Republican. But what does it mean to be centrist? They have interpreted that to mean if you take corporate cash and you're willing to vote with the Republicans either from time to time or quite often. Is there good evidence to prove that those Republican-like candidates do better electorally? The answer is no, there isn't. The Intercept ran a great piece about the 2006 elections that was supposed to be the test case for Rahm Emanuel being right, because Rahm Emanuel was running the DCCC at the time, and they had a wave election where Democrats swept into office. But if you actually broke down the people who won that race, it was often the candidates that Rahm Emanuel did not back. He wouldn't even send them any money, and they won their race anyway. And a lot of the candidates that Rahm Emanuel did back with a ton of corporate cash that ran as Republican light actually lost seats that could have been winnable. They don't have good evidence on their side. And they think, because they've been told by the Rahm Emanuels of the world, oh, progressives don't know anything, progressives should be avoided, they're not practical, they're not pragmatic, all these things. Or they don't understand politics. No, you don't understand politics. You don't understand that a populist message is more likely to work. That a guy like Greg Edwards, who's a pastor from the community, saying, I'm going to look out for the community, and yes, I'm going to fight to raise your wages. That's not an impractical message. Your idiotic message of, I will help corporations and they might or might not help you at a later time is not resonating. It's not working with voters. And your obsession with corporate money has now become clearly counterproductive. And by the way, all the money you're throwing in television is no longer working. So all those old assumptions about who is electable are wrong. And then there's a third layer, which is, in this case, race. Now, I would be surprised, and some of you might disagree, but I would be surprised if the guys at the DCCC are some sort of rabid racist who are like, oh, we got to chase that black pastor out of the race. But do they have certain assumptions about who's electable in a Republican district? They might think, oh, in a district that, again, used to be Republican, all the districts have been redrawn in Pennsylvania. So that is totally up in the air. And by the way, if there's a wave coming, that's the whole point. You unseat Republicans and get Democrats to win. They have this assumption that those districts are like incredibly right wing and all they care about is giving everything to corporations and perhaps discriminating against certain people. So given their assumptions, then it becomes less surprising that they would think maybe Greg Edwards is not electable. I can't wait to prove them wrong. Okay, I think progressives are far more electable. I think we're going to find out because we're going to have these primaries. The Pennsylvania primaries are coming up soon. By the way, if you'd like for this inane strategy of the corporate establishment Democrats that backfire, go help Greg Edwards. We're not afraid to share his links with you guys. EdwardsForPA.com. Get Greg on the ballot. EdwardsForPA.com/events. Donate so that he can compete with the big donor money that's being poured in by the Democrats. JusticeDemocrats.com/EdwardsAttack. So we'll have all those links down below in the description box on YouTube and the comment section on Facebook. Now, did it work in the case of Laura Moser? Because now they're attacking Greg Edwards, but we already have the test case from last week when they attacked Laura Moser, who's another Justice Democrat, also uncorrupted, also deeply progressive, running in Texas, who has an election tomorrow, by the way, a primary. We're going to find out definitively tomorrow night. You should check out our live coverage of that on tytnetwork.com tomorrow night at 8 o'clock Eastern. Now, here's a report from the Washington Post about that. According to the poll conducted with 726 likely Democratic primary voters, Moser has moved from 6th to 2nd place since January, which would secure her a place in the May runoff, exactly what the DCCC had tried to prevent. Oops. They attacked her publicly and said, she's the real progressive in the race. And people are like, oh, thank you, appreciate that. We'll move her up to 2nd place and hopefully get her in the runoff. So now that poll, by the way, done by the Republicans, so take it with a grain of salt, but no one is disputing the numbers involved. And the Republicans also have totally wrong assumptions about who is and who is not electable. So now finally back to now Politico on the Laura Moser situation and an update on it. The DCCC has warned for months, they explain, that it would wade into crowded primary fields here and elsewhere, either to pick favorites or harm candidates it sees as weaker in the general election, but there are a few signs here that the DCCC's punches have landed. Instead, Moser's fundraising has ticked up. She's collected more than $130,000 since the DCCC post on February 22nd. Oops, all you did was help her. So I hope that is the case with Greg Edwards as well. At least the DCCC has now told you who the real progressive in the race is. You might want to act based on that information. By the way, we will also have Laura Moser's links down below. And if you want to find out all of the uncorrupted candidates, go to justdemocrats.com and you'll see there are 52 candidates across the country. And apparently the Democratic establishment is now running scared. Okay, so let me give you one more story in this segment about a sign of the times. Okay, some new billboards going out being very aggressive against the NRA and against Republican politicians supporting them. Now, some of these are by different groups, but this one just went up, and it's a doozy. There it is in Florida. First one is up in Pensacola, saying the NRA is a terrorist organization. Damn, I'm not sure I've ever seen a billboard that strong, especially from the left. The right wing does, massive attacks fairly regularly, but the left, to counter that way, they almost sound like us. I'm glad to see that it's catching on. In fact, I looked into who was behind those signs because they're going to put up 2 more, so they'll have 3 billboards, if you will. Second one's going up in Pittsburgh, third one's going up in a different part of Pennsylvania. So when I named our PAC to get money out of politics, our meaning just the folks that are involved in it, back in 2011, I called it Wolf PAC. And people thought, that's crazy, man, that's incredibly aggressive. And you're supposed to name PACs things like Americans for America and make sure they're benign and boring and completely uninteresting. No, I said in that initial announcement, we're gonna name it Wolf PAC so that they know they're not coming for us, we're coming for them. So who's the group behind that billboard calling the NRA a terrorist organization? A new PAC called Mad Dog PAC. Now that's a PAC after my own heart. So they're not alone. There are others that are also putting up billboards, but you're getting a sense here, the left is finally willing to be far more aggressive. It's about damn time. All right, now speaking of which, we go to 3 billboards that appeared outside of Miami to hold Marco Rubio accountable. As you can see there, it says, hold on, it is, okay. It says, slaughtered in school and still no gun control. How come, Marco Rubio? Damn, that's really harsh and really true. So obviously a reference to 3 billboards outside of Ebbing, Missouri, a movie that's out right now. But these are things that the mainstream media and mainstream Democrats would have and still largely find unacceptable. And I like to see that these groups are saying, I don't give a damn what you think is or is not acceptable. The group for the 3 billboards addressing Marco Rubio is Avance. So they're also joining the fight. But now the Democrats are like, wait a minute, we better get into this thing. So they've got one up in Florida addressing Rick Scott. This is paid for by the Florida Democratic Party. And it says 612 days between Pulse and Parkland, Rick Scott did nothing. And they're quoting the Sun Sentinel there. It's obviously less harsh, but at least bothers to fight Rick Scott, which in the past they've done almost nothing to fight. And it bothers the fight on the issue of guns. And over the last week, we revealed to you that the CCC sent memos out to Democratic candidates after the Vegas massacre, the largest one in modern history, saying, just offer thoughts and prayers, do not focus on gun control. And even after the Parkland, Florida shooting, there was another memo that the DCCC memo sent out saying, thoughts and prayers, don't go political. But good to see that that is falling on deaf ears as progressives finally get in the fight in a significant way. I'm tired of the right wing constantly attacking us and there being no counterpunch. Well, it appears the counterpunch has arrived. All right, when we come back, Trump aide goes on television 3 different times and lights the place on fire. What in the world is he saying about Donald Trump? Find out when we come back. We are actually the longest running daily stream on the planet. Later tonight, we start a revolution. Yes, another one.
I ask leave of the Senate to continue my remarks.
Too strong.
You're not answering the question. Answer the question.
No one is above the law, and that includes the President of the United States of America.
Go, engage, fire.
Congrats to the Young Turks. They actually won a Streamy Award tonight.
We'd like to thank Donald Trump, obviously.
We just crossed 7.6 billion views.
Revolution won't be televised.
Hello, Internet.
I am the least anti-Semitic person that you've ever seen.
I think there's blame on both sides.
Oh, these politicians, they're the worst.
They had these beautiful soft towels.
It's just so wrong.
They took your wealth and redistributed it to them.
The government's robbing you, and they're distracting you with fucking nonsense.
Fake news, the enemy of the people.
Nobody knew that healthcare could be so complicated.
I can't speak as dumb as he understands.
The market will be destroyed by this plan, and 45 million people will be left without insurance.
They will be met with fire and fury.
We've just launched 59 missiles.
MSNBC shows the bombs taking off, and Al Jazeera shows you when they land.
The profiling and the Muslim bans have begun.
Today, my father and brother await deportation.
Horrific act of violence in Charlottesville. I want you to see what hate looks like in America.
What a sick country we live in.
It's time to get up and fight back.
Giant protests against Donald Trump.
Women's marches take over more than 500 cities across the United States.
Immigrants throughout the United States who protest.
I don't think they're peasants. I actually think that they enrich this country with their culture.
I don't want a resistance. I want a revolution.
History is not on your side.
Your fundamental principle is flawed.
This is outrageous. It's unethical. It's bad government. And frankly, it's fucking, corruption.
We work together as a community and we stand up for each other.
A total solar eclipse, oh my God.
Climate change is my #1 issue, and to be able to help amplify the message and research of these workers is like a dream come true.
Colin Kaepernick chose to sit during the national anthem to protest police violence against African Americans.
This has sparked a new movement.
More and more women are sharing their stories of sexual assault.
It's happening right in front of our eyes as the culture is shifting.
We have to speak up ourselves and we have to create movements ourselves.
To see it unfolding in real time as women stand up together collectively and go no more.
So many women came out of that women's march and said, I'm running for office.
You want to talk about the revolution? Here it is. Yeah, it's going to be awesome.
TYT.
Young Turks.
You do have the power to change people. You do. I hope one day we can all learn to live together in a decent way and not let, oftentimes, the media and the corrupt established system tear us apart.
All right, back on TYT. John Brugliera writes in on Twitter, hashtag TYT Live, by the way, to talk to us while the show is live, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern. He says, Trump's tweets are making my head hurt even more so than usual. They are getting crazier and crazier, and there's good reason for that. He's in a panic. Brian Newton says, isn't this an example of how allowing a tiny bit of corruption fed into larger corruption later? Yes, Brian, it is. So the DCCC and the DNC and the Democratic Party said, no, let's just take a little bit of corporate cash, see what happens. And then they took a little more, and then all of a sudden they convinced themselves that corporate cash was the answer. All right, now Scylla says, asked an interesting question. Cenk, if a progressive Republican, and we exist, ran, would you, TYT, show them the same support as a Democrat? Well, yes and no. So here's what I mean by that. If you are really a progressive and agree with us on all the issues, then yeah, I don't care at all what you call yourself. You can call yourself a Republican, a Democrat, a Martian, what do I care, right? As long as you're with us on the policies. But no, in the sense that I find it weird that you would call yourself a Republican. What about the Republican Party appeals to you? So yes, I would come in very skeptical, to be honest. But if you really are a progressive, then that's all I care about. So I know that for some Democrats, that's like, that makes their heads explode. What letter is on the pom-pom? To them, that's like the most important thing in the world. We have to be a cheerleader for Team Democrat or Team Republican. Who gives a damn about the issues? I think the reverse. I care about the issues. I care about action and change. I don't really care what the letter is. But in this day and age, being a Republican is a curious thing to be. Okay, let's go over here and speaking of curious, give you a very curious story. Okay. Sam Nunberg is a former aide of Donald Trump. He worked on the campaign. He's now not in Trump's good graces. Apparently Trump's not in his good graces either. But nonetheless, he's going to not testify with Robert Mueller, who's asking him to, but not asking him to as a courtesy, but legally asking him to. So I'm going to give you the details on that in a second, but I want to let you know, and I'm going to show you the clips here. Today, he went on 3 different television programs. First, he went on MSNBC with Katie Tur, then he went on CNN with Gloria Borger, and then finally stayed on CNN with Jake Tapper. And he said some things that are very important and very interesting and very curious. So before we get into those clips though, let me give you context as to who he is and why he's speaking out now. Washington Post explains former Trump aide Sam Nunberg said Monday that he has been subpoenaed to appear in front of a federal grand jury investigating Russia's interference in the 2016 presidential election, but that he will refuse to go. I'm not sure that that's really an option. So let's continue. Among those the subpoena requests information about are departing White House Communications Director Hope Hicks, former White House strategist Steve K. Bannon. He mentions Bannon in one of the clips that you'll see in a second, which is very important. Trump lawyer Michael Cohen, former Trump campaign manager Corey Lewandowski, and advisor Roger Stone. Nunberg said he does not plan to comply with the subpoena, including either providing testimony or the documents. Again, it's not really optional. Once you get a subpoena, if you don't do as the subpoena tells you to, in the overwhelming majority of the cases, the judge will eventually find you in contempt and yes, put you in prison. Well, Nunberg says to the Washington Post, let him arrest me. Mr. Mueller should understand I am not going in on Friday. Well, likely the answer to that will be, ask and ye shall receive. So we'll see how long he continues this attitude from a jail cell. Maybe as early as Friday. The Russians and Trump, he says, did not collude. Putin is too smart to collude with Donald Trump. It's a curious statement. But as you're about to see, he then contradicts himself a little bit later. Nunberg says, I'm not spending 80 hours going over my emails with Roger Stone and Steve Bannon and producing them. Donald Trump won this election on his own. He campaigned his ass off, and there is nobody who hates him more than me. So obviously they're not in good terms, but he's saying that Trump did not collude with the Russians. At least that's what he was saying to the Washington Post. Changes his tune in a second, as you'll see. But why? Why would he say that they're not colluding and then not cooperate with Mueller? Because if he really thinks Donald Trump didn't collude with the Russians, why not just go into Mueller and tell him that? Especially if he has evidence showing that it didn't happen, because he claims it didn't happen. Well, it's probably because he doesn't want to turn those emails over, because those emails are not going to only incriminate Donald Trump. They might also incriminate Sam Nunberg. Now, they might not incriminate him about the Russian collusion. They might not incriminate him even legally, but he might have said some things in those emails that would incriminate him politically or societally. So he might not want those emails to go out under any circumstance. But there is a circumstance under which they will probably come out, which is a lengthy enough visit to prison. So we'll see if that happens on Friday. But for the moment being, interestingly, Nunberg decided that even though he's not going to talk to prosecutors and he's not going to comply with the law, he will talk to reporters on air. Great. Let's find out what he's got in store. Here's his first clip with Katie Tur.
Let's see what Mr. Mueller does.
Are you worried about getting arrested?
I think it would be funny if they arrested me.
If you're held in contempt of court, wouldn't you have higher legal bills?
It would be really funny if they wanted to arrest me, because I don't want to spend 80 hours going over emails I had with Steve Bannon and Roger Stone. Donald Trump being involved in conservative politics was not good for his business. By the way, I think my lawyer's going to dump me. What do I have to produce them all my communications?
Are you ready to go to jail?
It's ridiculous. I'm not going to go to jail.
Agree to disagree. Okay, we'll find out on Friday though. So he says my lawyers are going to dump me. There's a good chance that'll happen. Yes. Okay, this is not a well-advised interview to go out there and spill the beans, as he's about to, even more importantly in the next clip, while not cooperating with special prosecutors. He insists over and over that he's not going to jail and that it would be funny if they arrested him. Not sure that's the word I'd use. And he says, why do I have to turn over my emails? Because you have a subpoena saying turn over your emails. This is a criminal investigation. Just because they're embarrassing doesn't mean you have the right not to turn them over. But now, remember, he had said earlier to the Washington Post that he thinks Trump did not collude. But wait till you hear what he says next. Watch.
What you're doing is surprising, to say the least. But you sat there in that room being questioned by Mueller's investigators. I want to hear directly from you. Do you think that they have something on the president?
I think they may. What? I think that he may have done something during the election.
What? Well, then you do think he colluded. And you just said it on national television. Yeah, I think he might have done something during the election with the Russians. And you think that they're not going to enforce a subpoena on you to find out what you know about what he might have done during that campaign when you worked on the campaign? Is this guy high? Okay, which is what all of social media is asking today. This is an unbelievable interview. We'll compare it to some of the legendary Trump aide interviews in a second, but okay, wait, he's not done though with the amazing revelations. Here's one more.
I spoke to Steve Bannon for the first time last week after I went in there, and I spoke to him, and Steve and I were discussing about how we both feel, Katie, like I'm telling you, that Trump may have very well done something during the election.
So now he says, not only do I think Trump did something during the election with the Russians, but so does Steve Bannon. Look, I don't know why they're all admitting this on national television, but I guess I'm thrilled about it. Wonderful, because now you're on the record. It's clear as day. Yes, now you're definitely going to need to talk to the special counsel, and you're going to need to tell them what you know about what Trump did during the campaign with the Russians and what Steve Bannon knows as well. That is amazing. Now, in the next interview on CNN, he went even further, but this is more, I think those two clips were the most important. This is more speculative. Let's watch.
Mueller thinks that Trump is a Manchurian candidate, and I will tell you I disagree with that.
Okay. He keeps going back and forth on whether he colluded with the Russians or not. In Trump's case, of course, it wouldn't be the Manchurian candidate, it'd be the Siberian candidate. Now, that is what I have thought all along for reasons that are obvious and public, and I think there's a world of evidence out there. But what I think is not nearly as important, to say the least, as what Robert Mueller finds in the evidence and reveals, partly by talking to people like Sam Nunberg who were there. Okay, one more. This is his third show now, all today. Final clip for you guys.
I'm spending a lot of money on legal fees. A lot of other people are. And granted, Donald Trump caused this because he's an idiot, because he decided to give an interview to Lester Holt the day after he fired James Comey, and then he decided to have the Russians in the Oval Office.
Now, I don't know why Nunberg keeps saying he didn't collude, but right there now for the third time in interviews today, making a reference to how Trump seemed to be obstructing justice and colluding with the Russians. So that the first reference in that small clip there was, why did he admit on national TV to have fired James Comey because of the Russian investigation? Well, that's a great question. I'm not sure Sam Nunberg is the right guy to ask that question about why someone would admit things publicly that they shouldn't on national television, but it is a fair question and leads to the obvious conclusion that he's trying to cover something up. And he's saying, I've got all these legal bills because he was trying to cover up whatever he did. And then he says he then brought in the Russians to the Oval Office. Perhaps another sign of collusion. Now look, that's the weakest of the evidence, but that's Nunberg himself saying Trump did that, and which is causing all of these issues for me and causing the whole investigation in the first place. Can't wait to see what he says to Mueller eventually, either before or after prison. But this is now at least the second Trump aide to come forward and give an interview on national television that makes no sense in terms of how it affects them and the liability that they have and and exposing them to further investigations and subpoenas. Carter Page had done a similar interview where he admitted things that were so incredible that Chris Hayes at the end of the interview said, I don't know if you know what you're saying, but you should definitely get a lawyer. Okay, and maybe they're just emulating their former boss, Donald Trump, who also goes on national television and says things he shouldn't say. But there was a world of tweets about it. I only want to share one with you because I thought this one was the best. Danielle Kelly said after watching the first interview, Carter Page, nobody's better at going on national TV and incriminating themselves than I am. Sam Nunberg, hold my beer. Okay, fun for everybody, especially Robert Mueller. Lock him up, lock him up. We'll be right back. Back on the Young Turks. Brett Ehrlich joins us, everybody. Hey.
Hi. How do you do?
I do well.
Good.
How do you do?
I do equally well, likely.
Okay. All right, a couple of quick tweets for you, and then Brett's got more stories. Santos Huante writes in, white collar privilege is strong in this Sam Nunberg.
I was so busy looking through prepping for this hour that I see how many videos there were from him and all the people who keep tweeting about him. I can't wait to find out what you said about it.
Yeah, it's fun for everybody. But I don't know if it has to do with him being white, but there is a certain amount of maybe elite privilege where they think, well, aren't we above the law? I can just go on national TV and tell you I know that the president, did something in the campaign with the Russians, and I'll ignore a subpoena and I won't go to prison.
I'd love to see how this pans out.
Yeah, all right.
Because I really don't know these days.
But it is partly white privilege. We're going to talk a little bit about white privilege in the first story in a second anyway. But by the way, I said it wrong. Sorry, Santos. He said white collar privilege, which is actually perfect. That's exactly right, right? But it is a little bit of white privilege too, because if you told minorities, hey, there's a subpoena out for you, do you think the government will enforce it, or do you think you could just ignore it?
You can't ignore it. You know it's coming down.
Yeah, it's not going to be an open question. Anyway, Tom Zawacki says, is Nunberg really this foolish, or does he just pay a lot of money to substandard lawyers?
They're the dregs. He's the dregs of high society. You hear the term dregs of society. The people running the government are the dregs of high society. That's what it is.
Well, and in a sense, that's exactly what Donald Trump was. Mm-hmm. And so here we are.
That's exactly it. Yep. Slumlords and profiting off of that.
So one last thing now, which is not a tweet. I just want to remind you guys, look, we're especially in election season, we're doing a lot more coverage than just the normal show 6 to 8 p.m. Now tonight, of course, as we do every Monday through Thursday, this Rebel headquarters at 8 o'clock. But on Mondays, as you saw earlier, Dan Rather is on at 5:30, so he's on before we are. So make sure you're checking that out every Monday, tuning in a half an hour early to check out Dan Rather's show, which is excellent. And then tomorrow night, and this will happen on a lot of Tuesdays, is election night, and it is the first set of elections for the 2018 cycle, and it's Texas. It's gigantic. Beto O'Rourke in a primary to see if he'll go up against Ted Cruz. 7 Justice Democrats, including Laura Moser. We'll see if the Democratic Party attack her against her backfired. So lots of drama tomorrow night. That starts at 8 o'clock Eastern, because that's when the polls close in Texas. Okay?
That's awesome.
All right, so what's next, Brett?
Okay, the question is, does a Florida middle school teacher also run a white nationalist podcast? We're gonna show you 2 pictures, here they are. One is of Tiana Dalikhov, and the other is of Diana Volicic. One is a known middle school teacher. The other is a known host of a white nationalist podcast. The question is, are they the same person? Huffington Post pointed this out in kind of an expose. Things that lead me to believe they are the same person is they have the same earrings and the same face.
I was wondering when you were going to get to the fact that they're the same person.
The earrings are kind of a tip-off, but the face thing, that's harder to purchase. But who knows? And also the fact that they point out that all but 2 of the letters are the exact same.
And they're both 25, and the woman on the podcast said she's a local teacher in Florida. And the other one's a local teacher in Florida.
And their tenures that they said at the schools at which they work are the same length. They've been there for a year. It seems pretty obvious. Now the troubling thing, obviously, is if this is true, there is a teacher who runs a white nationalist podcast. And not just that, that on that podcast, she had a guest on, Tiana Dalikhov, that said they, the white nationalists, don't have to be vocal about their views, but get in there. Be more covert and just start taking over those places, talking about schools in different areas where they can kind of get influence whenever they can. And Volicic wrote back, said, right, I'm absolutely one of them. So if this is the same person who's a teacher, that person just admitted to using their position of power to influence young minds by interjecting elements of white nationalism into a classroom environment.
So, let us begin the troubling aspects of this story.
So many.
Okay, so first of all, note the irony of the right wing who had attacked Obama for once going to a school saying he's trying to indoctrinate the children. Well, first of all the presidents go to schools. George Bush was famously at an elementary school on 9/11 when we were attacked and stayed there for quite some time, reading a book upside down. But look at this. It turns out, now this is the extreme right wing to be fair, right?
Right.
But they're trying to indoctrinate the kids and they say it. She said on the podcast talking about her and her guests, like, oh, you got to sneak in there, make sure you do your propaganda and get the kids to believe it.
Yeah.
So the reason they say that about the left wing is it's projection. They assume that whatever they're doing and whatever they're thinking, you're also thinking and doing. But it's not true. We'd like to indoctrinate them with things like math.
I love it. Well, there was one moment that I don't have a graphic for where she said that science has proven that certain races are smarter than others. So she's using science.
Oh, well, there you go then.
Wrongly. She also, some tweets from Tiana Dolichov, the alter ego who hosts the podcast. It isn't supremacist or hateful to prefer your own people over others. And then also this one. This is, if you see the graphic below, it is a reference to kind of a teacher manual that says confronting racism in classrooms. And she writes, you know, America's students' education system is designed to enable victimization when teachers are forced to learn about institutional racism and prove it's real when it isn't. I literally feel brain cells dying as I read this bull S. Hashtag Sunday morning. Well, science proves that you actually can't feel that at all. And that you're wrong about it. Yeah, and that was just at a portion of a teacher guidebook simply saying that you should acknowledge that institutional racism exists and also that people are reticent to bring that up because it means that they have to acknowledge their own preconceived notions about racism and their own internal feelings about racism. And that's what someone addressing their deep-seated hatred looks like when they're fighting back against it.
Yeah, I love when she says, it isn't supremacist or hateful to prefer your own people over others. No, it actually kind of is. That's kind of the point of racism, which is my people are better than your people. So, yeah. I mean, it's not like you're not allowed to have tea with people that are the same race as you are or ethnic background. Have at it, Hoss. Go out drinking, do whatever you want. But if you say, I prefer my people over your people, yeah, that's racism.
And when previously she said that they are better, they learn better, certain races are smarter than others. That is supremacy. You're saying that you're superior to others.
Let alone when you think that science has proven it and you're gonna teach that to the kids. That was in the context of a conversation she was having on our podcast with another racist. And that guy was saying like, they pretend that people for a kid from Nigeria and a kid who came from Sweden are supposed to learn exactly the same and have, quote, the same IQ. But now, to be fair, Brett, maybe they think the Nigerian is smarter than the guy from Sweden.
Did not clarify the scores. We didn't see the box score on that.
But as I pointed out, and you could go look this up as well, actually Nigerian students do exceedingly well.
So weird that they pick the one that's like in the studies as like, they're doctors, man.
It's almost as if they didn't look up the science.
That's what it is. And you can listen to clips from the podcast and it's just that. It's just people saying what they feel like saying to make themselves feel better and superior to others.
Another one of my favorites was when she said that the JQ is complicated.
Oh God, the Jewish question.
Yeah, I didn't know what the JQ was. I was like, I don't think I've read the JQ in a while. What fashion are they?
There's the EQ and the IQ.
And the GQ.
And GQ's a great magazine, it's a great read.
But anyway, it turns out it means the Jewish question. And I'm pretty sure it's not a question. Two, if it is, it's not complicated. It turns out she's reading some anti-Semitic book about how the Jews control everything. Oh, shocking, I didn't see that one coming.
Yeah.
Oh, and of course she'd like to eradicate all the Muslims. But I would like to thank the extreme right wing for bringing Jews and Muslims together in America. Right, thank you, we appreciate that.
Yeah, the thing though is she's right. She's right in that when you're a teacher, in a school, you are in an extreme position of power. And what you say to kids is very important because you never know what kids are gonna hold on to. And it is very terrifying. And the curriculum that she is teaching, she's right that people have chosen that. And it is true that that has developed over time, but I like to say that it's developed in a good way. Like if you look back, there's a viewer who asked me, like from a different country, who asked, how are Native Americans portrayed in schools? And I thought back and I'm like, well, that's changed over time. From you know how they were portrayed back in the old days when it was like cowboys versus Indians, and then it developed into a position where we were taught about smallpox and blankets and diseases and buying Manhattan for a ridiculous sum to someone who doesn't have any concept of like land ownership. We do develop it over time, and it is super important, which is why we have to be on alert when these kinds of things rear their head. And there are other situations where this has come to the fore. In June, the principal of a charter school in New Orleans was fired from his job after video surfaced that showed him wearing rings associated with white nationalism. I don't know if you remember that. He had similarly appeared on White Nationalist podcast. And a former Catholic substitute teacher and field hockey coach in Maryland was fired earlier this year after his school learned that he was also employed by the National Policy Institute, white supremacist Richard Spencer's think tank, and the website altright.com. Like Volatich, he posted on social media under a pseudonym. And the initial response from the school was to confront this teacher that they thought was affiliated with it. She denied it, and the principal backed down. But after pressing the issue, the Huffington Post was able to create some kind of more pressure. And in the wake of it, the alter ego, Tiana Dolovich or whatever, pulled down a lot of her profiles.
But I'm sure that it was a coincidence that when they found the person who appeared to be her, who was a teacher who was now in trouble, that the alter ego pulled down all of her social media immediately.
It's crazy.
Probably a wild coincidence. But what Brett said there at the end is probably the most important for her in terms of whether she's gonna get to keep that job. On the podcast, she bragged about how she lied to the principal, that a teacher had complained that she was indoctrinating the students, and she basically said, "No, I just lied to them, and they believed me, ha ha." They might wanna rethink that.
So crazy. Should we move on to Facebook?
Yeah, and by the way, in case we have to clarify this, because some folks will say, well, I mean, why can't a white nationalist be a teacher? Well, are you sure she's going to teach African-American kids the same way that she teaches white kids, given what she assumes about them? God help a Muslim student in her class. And then if there's a Jewish student in the class, apparently that's a question for her. So obviously that person cannot be trusted to teach all of your kids and to treat all of your kids in the same way.
It's crazy. All right, moving on to Facebook.
Yep.
Facebook would like to apologize that it ran a certain survey asking if men should be allowed to request sexual pictures from underage girls. So Jonathan Haynes is the person this story starts with. He is a digital editor at The Guardian, and he was on Facebook and he got this pop-up. And it asked, Jonathan, we're asking a small group of people for their opinion. Could you take a few minutes to answer a short survey? And he was like, fun, surveys. I'll click yes. And here was the question he was faced with. It said, there are a wide range of topics and behaviors that appear on Facebook. And thinking about an ideal world where you could set Facebook's policies, how would you handle the following? A private message in which an adult man asks a 14-year-old girl for sexual pictures. And then it's a multiple choice. This content should be allowed on Facebook and I would not mind seeing it. This content should be allowed on Facebook, but I don't want to see it. This content should not be allowed on Facebook and no one should be able to see it, or I have no preference on this topic.
That last one, Brett's my favorite. Grown men looking at sexual pictures of 14-year-old girls. I have no preference on that topic. Could go either way.
So he asked the editor, digital editor from The Guardian writes, wait, is making it secret the best Facebook can offer here? Not, calling the police, and shouldn't laws figure here as being quite important on determining rules?
Yeah, so Facebook, by the way, does not deny that this was a survey. They say, yes, it was, and it was a mistake, and we'll pull it down. Now, I don't know why they were doing it, and let's be fair and open-minded about it. And look, and I'll tell you, Facebook's a partner of ours, so take, I'm just keeping it real with you guys and letting you know that. But you hope that it was some sort of thing like, if you answered yes, it should be allowed, and I'd like to see it, that it was then reported to the authorities. Like I don't know if they're. Right. By the way, I'm not sure they should do that either.
No, they should. I don't think they should do that.
Yeah, but like my point being is there might have been another reason. But if there is, they should share it because this looks really bad.
If we could go back to the graphic, here's what I think is happening. You see the question graphic. Okay, so you see the difference in, and this is like weird parsing programmer talk, but like it goes into italics after the colon in the question. I am all but certain that that is one of the many questions that are asked on surveys. And each one of those questions is in italics, and it's pulled from a issue that is really at the heart of Facebook. And Facebook is a tech company, and they are just collecting data on how people perceive this issue. And they're not doing anything that we can really conclude from that data, but they are just gathering it. So I would, like, if I'm choosing which data collection practice Facebook does that I would like to criticize, I don't think this is the one for me. I think there's a lot more like creepy stuff. Like I was on a Google Doc and I literally wrote like mid-century modern furniture in a joke in a script. And like the next day it was like, do you want to buy some mid-century modern furniture?
Oh, Jesus.
That kind of stuff is kind of terrifying to me. And that's the more data entry here. I mean, the joke response that I had to it was like, in this day and age, so much is uncertain as to how people feel about stuff that maybe Facebook was like, is child porn still weird to people? Is it still bad to you? We would like a response. Hopefully you're gonna say it's bad.
And Facebook might also, they're dealing with humanity here, as we all are on the internet. And what I mean by that is that the internet allows for more unvarnished side of humanity. In other words, the ugly side of humanity to come out. Now, the internet also allows for wonderful things to happen, like this show. But so Facebook dealing with all this incoming madness of the id of humanity, maybe is trying to like sort it out and like, just like you said, I mean, I know you're joking, but like, what's not like, what do people think is acceptable and not acceptable anymore? Not that they are going to then say, oh, if you think it's acceptable, hunky-dory, let's go forward. And they clarify, they've always had a policy against it, of course. They said ever since the beginning of Facebook. What do they call this?
Child grooming. They prohibited child grooming on Facebook since our earliest days. We have no intention of changing this, and we regularly work with the police to ensure that anyone found acting in such a way is brought to justice.
Right, and I believe them, and it's illegal, right? Having said all of that, yeah, it was definitely a mistake. I mean, you can't ask like, now if someone were to hire someone else on Facebook to assassinate your wife, would that A, be acceptable and how much? B, no preference, not really sure, I'll get back to you Tuesday, right?
Right.
No, you can't do that, that's crazy. Why are you asking the survey question?
Right, and they're very like legalistic. You can see the legal framings of all these options. One is like, is it free speech and it should be allowed? And there's a lot of, if you look at like sex trafficking laws that protect forums from prosecution, and like Backpage and Facebook falls under this and Craigslist falls under this, where it's this weird archaic version of protecting forums again, as just like, listen, we're like the phone company. You don't get mad at the phone company when someone makes a call to a hitman, do you? You should go after the people who are making the call to the hitman. You're not gonna get mad at Facebook when someone asks for a child porn picture, right? You're gonna go after the person who asked for the child porn picture. There's a lot of that built into this that I can see from the different ways that it's put. That against the backdrop of the whole fake news epidemic, when Facebook is trying to figure out like, what do people want to see versus like, what is the lay of the land of people's preferences, and how much are they against what we're already doing versus for what we're already doing? And they're a tech company, and I think a lot of times you see things that end up like this, which are tone deaf because they're trying to find a technological solution to something that requires a lot of emotional intelligence to figure out.
Yeah, so in summary, I'll save you the trouble of the survey. The overwhelming majority are against it. And the people who are for it, call somebody. I know you're not supposed to call the cops, but I'm just saying. Oh, actually, they are supposed to call the cops.
Right.
If there's a guy who's actually trying to do it.
Yeah.
Okay, anyways, all right, we gotta take a break, guys. When we come back, among the different stories we have for you guys is Mike Huckabee gets kicked out the door and then goes on Fox and cries about it, which I find to be kind of awesome.
What's J&A?
Ja'Cory and Arthur.
You guys share a mug?
Yeah, you both take our hot cocoa black.
That doesn't make any sense.
Plus, I'm right-handed and Arthur's left-handed, so our lips wouldn't even touch the same area. It's perfect.
No, I'm not left-handed.
What do you mean? I've seen you type with your left hand.
Yeah, and also with my right hand. That's how typing works.
You have in common with your daughter?
I was going to say sex, but I can't relate that.
You said I had small hands. They're not small, are they? I never heard that one before.
I just shot a clip. It's time sensitive and it needs to be edited right now.
Did anybody call for an editor?
Need this in an hour.
But you're an editor too.
Fuck you.
Back on the Young Turks, Cenk Uygur and Brett Ehrlich with you guys. Member shout outs today are Travis Beto and Sarah Rivka Bass. So members also get our election night coverages, which is going to happen tomorrow night for Texas. And today in the post game, Brett will come back. And one of the things I want to talk about is my changing perception of Native Americans.
Oh, interesting.
So what I was taught as a kid, what I believed, and it's a wide range, and how I see it today. And I think that is like you mentioned it in that first story, and I think that's actually a really interesting topic about what we were taught and then what we've come to believe. So tytnetwork.com/join to become a member. All right, some tweets real quick. Dave says about the Facebook story, I think this is obviously a case where the questions and the responses were written separately, which goes to the point that Brett made. Hard-boiled eggs and nuts, which is fascinating as in real life and as a title on Twitter. Writes in about Nunberg. There was a desperation in Nunberg voice that was almost alarming, like a man who's almost at the end of his rope. I hear you. I hope that's not the case, but it did sound weird in that way. Blue Hyperion writes in, I believe about the teacher we just talked about. I know, and this is on YouTube Super Chat. I know her, and this isn't a surprise. The only thing is she never talked about her views with me, a progressive, but called herself the Twitter Slayer online. Now, look, it's just a message sent in. It's not verified. We don't know, right, whether he actually did know her and it actually is her, etc. But an interesting perspective. Okay, and Jay makes a good point. Her strategy isn't novel. It's the old KKK idea of the invisible empire. Excellent point. Nuno Martins is confused because he says, remember, only approved propaganda from the CIA or the military is acceptable. Excellent point. And finally, Carlos Danger says, they tried to indoctrinate me with algebra, but thankfully it didn't take.
Algebra, Muslim.
Actually is, so that's a good point. Maybe that's why the right wing is not in favor of it.
Geometry, Greek.
Greek, no, I think we're okay with Greeks.
We okay with Greeks?
Yeah.
All right.
Right.
It's all Greek to me.
So geometry's back, but algebra is out.
So are all your numbers. They're Arabic. The ones you use are Arabic numerals.
Okay.
That's all I'm saying.
All right, let's go forward. What do we?
Okay, so an update on the Kansas man who was wrongfully imprisoned for 23 years. His name is Lamont McIntyre, and he was in prison for 23 years. He was recently in October exonerated on double murder charges. He sat down with CBS, and two things kind of really came to light about this. One, just the facts of his trial, which at his trial in 1994, when he was 17, there was no physical evidence or motive presented. Worse, and this is kind of what is crystallizing now, according to McIntyre's current lawyers, lead police detective Roger Golubsky built the case by threatening witnesses. There are about a dozen people behind bars whose cases are connected to Detective Golubsky, and a senior member of the Kentucky Bureau of Investigation announced that he is going to look into those past behaviors and is launching a more formal inquiry. So that's one part about it. And the idea that there are multiple people who are still sitting behind bars who might be suffering the exact same fate that Lamont suffered for 23 years. The other aspect of it is that he lives in Kansas. And Kansas is one of the few states in America that does not compensate you if it is found that you were wrongfully imprisoned. According to the Innocence Project, the federal government, the District of Columbia, and 32 states have compensation statutes of some form. The following 18 states do not, and then they list them: Alaska, Arizona. You can see if your state falls into that category below, but that is about, it's almost that's almost 20% of the states actually, so it's not that small of a number. No, wait, that's 40% almost? Jeez, that's a lot of states.
Yeah, so he was in prison for longer than he was out of prison. So he put him in prison when he was 17, he serves 23 years. Now he's 41, finally gets out. First, let's just rewind and talk about how miserable the case against him was. And you see this stuff, and it is amazing that people get life sentences. Sometimes they get the death penalty on the flimsiest evidence. He got 2 life sentences so somebody went and killed 2 guys that were sitting in a car, okay? So why did they think it was Lamont McIntyre? Well, they had one witness that said, I think it's a guy from with the name Lamont, okay? So, and they're like, and she points this Lamont McIntyre out. Okay, well you say, all right, that's something, right? And then they get a second witness to back up the first witness, who it turns out later said, no, Golubsky made me say that. He threatened me and forced me to say it. It isn't him. It isn't him, I made it up. And they're like, yeah, whatever, go ahead and stay in prison for 2 decades anyway, okay? In the trial, as Brett pointed out, no gun, no motive, no physical evidence. Turns out Lamont McIntyre doesn't even know these guys. And they presented no evidence that he knows these guys. So without knowing these guys, he just up and shot them for no reason at all. And one of the witnesses we know made up the story, so-called witnesses. And then there was the police at the time could not present any evidence in the trial that they even bothered to look for evidence, that they bothered to look for the gun or a motive or physical evidence of any sort. On this, they gave him 2 life sentences. It's amazing what happens in America.
17. He's a 17-year-old.
And he was a 17-year-old, and of course, they waited till he was 18 and tried him as an adult so they can give him life sentences. So, and another amazing part of the story is, one of the guys who was shot was around the same age as Lamont was. He was a young guy, right? And his mom joined Lamont's mom in fighting for Lamont's innocence and to get him out for these last 20 years. From the beginning, she's like, it's not him. It's definitely not him. Why are we putting him in prison? That doesn't help my son. That doesn't help justice. She refused to even go see her son's burial place until she got justice for Lamont McIntyre, which is amazing. Which leads me to my other point. When you do gross injustices like this, you never get the actual guy. You never get the person who actually did the killings, who I would like to bring to justice. And it's out of laziness and corruption and all this stuff. So which then leads to, why did this took 8 years and they wonderful people, wonderful work on it.
The Innocence Project, yeah.
Yeah, and a couple of different groups worked on this, and so why in the middle of the hearing back in October did the prosecutor come out and go, never mind, he's free to go, we changed our minds? I'll tell you why. Okay, so one of the charges was, as they were relitigating this basically to try to get him off, was that not only did the cop do something wrong, but that prosecutor Tara Moorhead, who's now a prosecutor in the US Attorney's Office in Kansas, had also done something wrong. And one of the things she did wrong was that she did not reveal what apparently was a romantic relationship with the judge in the case. And the judge in that case was J. Dexter Burdett, who was scheduled to testify, because he was forced to, in this case. And before he was gonna come out and testify, the prosecutor's like, never mind, you're free to go. Okay, off you go. Our bad. Sorry, did we keep you in prison for 23 years? Didn't mean to do that. In other words, the judge was going to get embarrassed and never disclose the relationship he had with the prosecutor, and hence did not treat Lamont McIntyre fairly. And by the way, I would like to have justice on that as well. And then on top of everything else, they're like, nope, sorry, not gonna give you a goddamn thing. We robbed you of your life and did it in the most grotesquely unfair way. Who cares? You get nothing.
To put in perspective the compensation that's kind of the standard, statutes, according to the Innocence Project, should include either a fixed sum or a range of recovery for each year spent in prison. President George W. Bush actually endorsed Congress's recommended amount of up to $50,000 per year, with an additional $50,000 for each year spent on death row. Adjusted for inflation, that's $63,000. Texas is even a more robust compensation framework, compensating wrongfully convicted $80,000 per year, and an annuity set at the same amount, and essentially compensating you for what was taken. Because if you are convicted of a crime you did commit, we take away your freedom. Well, if we take away your freedom, what do we give back when you get out? The only thing that you can really look for is money. And if he was imprisoned in Texas instead of Kansas, they would have given him $1.84 million for the time he spent behind bars. There's a weird way to look at it because it's like monetary compensation, but like it's something. It makes sense. You drink hot coffee that doesn't have a label on it, you get millions of dollars. If someone takes away your freedom for 23 years, I don't know.
Yeah, it's the least we can do. And so 1.84 million is a lot of money. I get it. But you and I didn't spend 23 years in prison. Would you trade your life from the age of 17 to the age of 41 for $1.84 million? As much money as that is, hell no. What, you just traded away your life? What's the point of the money?
And all his quotes are so positive. He's like, I'm not looking back, I'm looking forward. I don't want to be angry. I don't want any, I just want to be positive and look toward my future. And it's like, okay, I'm glad he's that way. I'm pissed off for him and I want some kind of justice. And it just looks, and you would have to get the state to pass that. Make a law that would take the burden off him.
All right, we got to take a break here, guys. Once we come back from the break, we got a couple more excellent stories for you guys. So come right back.
They'd rather lose to Republicans than have a progressive win with them. That's how dumb the corporate Democrats are.
It's the Democrats who lull you to sleep, and at the end of the day, they're the ones who push the right-wing agenda.
You're saying that if the Democrats become more progressive, they'll retain more of their voters and they'll win. This is why you lost to Trump, you fucking moron. What the fuck is wrong with you? Whoever wrote that, I'm sure they were typing with one hand and going like this with you. The Democrats are dead. The way you feel right now, that's how a chump feels. Do not freak out.
So we had a story earlier in the show about gun control, and they put up some billboards fighting back against the NRA, which I love. Well, that connects to our sponsor, Aspiration.com. There it is. Anyway, Aspiration keeps all your money in clean places, so they don't ever put it into gun manufacturers, into fossil fuel companies, or to private prisons. So you can sleep well at night knowing your money is not only safe and actually getting the best interest rate in the market, but also clean. And if you're progressive, that should matter to you. If you're not a progressive and you're just conservative or moderate and don't care about any of that, they still give you the best rate of return, and they don't charge you a minimum monthly balance or minimum monthly deposit or any service fees, and all the ATMs are free. So it's a win-win-win. That's why I keep telling you about Aspiration.com. That's why they're our sponsor, and that's why I think you should use them. Go. Turks Dionysus says this is why there should be no death penalty. Absolutely right. Marty B says I finally remembered to catch Dan Rather's show today on TYT and I loved it. Thank you, Marty. And if you didn't catch it, of course, all the members get it. So tytnetwork.com/join, you get it in a convenient way. And then it's also up on YouTube and Facebook pages for us as well. Now, Newerbex writes in on YouTube Super Chat, and he gave $100. You know, you can give money on YouTube Super Chat. That's why we read those comments more and it helps the show, etc. But thank you, that's a lot. And he said, last contribution for a bit, still got mouths to feed, but I'm ecstatic to share I've recruited 6 members and raised money for TYT with each birthday and holiday since 2015. Just got Twitter to connect with hashtag TYT and to build on my own platform for a change at Nick Robles, hashtag March for Our Lives. Nick,
awesome.
You're awesome. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Okay, what's next?
Frances McDormand won the Oscar for Best Actress and she gave a speech where she had all the females who were nominated stand up and told all the gatekeepers in Hollywood to take meetings with them and hear their pitches for ideas. And then she left with 2 words, which were inclusion writer. And instantly it was trending on Merriam-Webster, like the definition of inclusion, the definition of writer. A lot of people were asking, what is that? Well, there are sources who have kind of clarified what that is, including the Washington Post, which writes, an inclusion writer is a stipulation that the cast and or crew in the film reflect real demographics, including proportionate number of women, minorities, LGBTQ individuals, and people with disabilities. Big name actors who have leverage in negotiations could put the stipulation into their contracts and drastically change representation in a film.
Yeah, I was sure that it was a sister of Ghost Rider.
Ghost Ride the Whip, everyone. My wife was like, it's writer. Who's an inclusion writer? We need female writers? And it's like, no, a writer. We always hear the weird ones, which are like, Van Halen doesn't want brown M&Ms, so take the brown ones out by hand.
But as someone in our production meeting said today, if you can ask for brown M&Ms, you could also ask for brown people. So now, look, it's all structured in different ways, and it also depends on how much leverage you have. And kidding aside, you can ask for different things, and you could ask for something as simple as, I want the film to be representative of America, so 50% male, 50% female. I don't know if you know this, that is what the country is, actually probably about 51% female. And they're saying, if you have power, Frances McDormand is saying, to all the stars out there, then use it for good. Okay, fine, get your brown M&Ms or whatever and get your fridge filled with caviar, whatever it is that you like and want, great, but also ask for diversity. And so it definitely depends a little bit on the execution of how you do that, but I think overall it's a noble idea. If it turns out that they already have diversity, great, mission accomplished, right? But if it turns out there's no reason not to have diversity and they don't, and historically films have been packed with especially males, let alone the issue of race and LGBT, etc. But they really have been massively packed with males, partly because men make the movies and men write the movies disproportionately.
Right, and like 17% of films, I think, or some small number are directed by females. So it's not just in front of the camera, behind the camera, there can be more diversity, that's always a good thing. Whitney Cummings pointed out that it was only gonna help films to have a more diverse repertoire. Can we go to graphic 63, which is a fact from the person who came up with this concept at the Annenberg School of Inclusion and Initiatives Director, Stacy Smith. She said the percentage of females on screen hasn't changed since the late 1940s. That's because small minor roles and supporting roles are very biased towards straight, white, able-bodied males. That's a staggering statistic, and one that just should stick in your mind when these things are coming.
Yeah, and I just want you guys to understand why that's the case. So if you just heard what I just said, you might think, well, hey, if men write the movies and they're the directors, well, it is what it is. No, it's not, it is what it is. The people who pay them to do that were also male. And it started back in the 1920s through the 40s to present day. And so since men passed those roles on to other men, it became a giant institutional advantage for men. So then it made it harder for women to break in. So now they are, but apparently not nearly enough, because it's the same percentage as the 1940s, right? But as you can tell with this movement, women are gathering up more power, and I think Frances McDormand is obviously right that you should use it for good, for positive change. And so, look, if it gets to a point where now all of a sudden women are dominant and 68% of all the cast are women, and we need to fight for justice for men, we'll do that,
Yeah.
right? But that's not where we are today.
Right, the original wording was, as long as it's sensible for the plot, tertiary speaking characters should match the gender distribution of the setting of the film. It's a very reasonable way to put it. Like Bridesmaids is gonna star women, The Hangover, It's a Bachelor Party, is gonna star men, but those tertiary characters, why not have it representative of the place where it takes place, and then also deal with it behind the camera. All right, we gotta move on to Mike Huckabee.
Yes.
Mike Huckabee, one day he was named, this is his picture, he is a former governor of Arkansas, also a two-time presidential hopeful. He one day was named to the board of the Country Music Association Foundation, the fundraising arm of the Country Music Association, and the next day, poof, he was gone. Why? There were people who stepped up and didn't have and had a problem with his stance on gay marriage, like Jason Owen, who's a Monument Records co-president, who writes Mike Huckabee speaks of the sort of things that would suggest my family is morally beneath his, and uses language that has a profoundly negative impact on young people all across the country, not to mention how harmful and damaging his deep involvement with the NRA is. What a shameful choice. Mike Huckabee, he says he was forced to resign, and then he went to Fox News to cry about it. Here's what it looks like. Take a look at this video.
Today, the new, I guess, direction of the left is, in the name of tolerance, be intolerant. In the name of love, hate people. And in the name of diversity, demand conformity. Because that's where we are. And it's not enough to say, I disagree and I wish this person, would change his mind. Today, it's let's put him out of business. Let's close his store. Let's not allow him to continue to operate a business. Let's damage him professionally. Let's hurt his brand. I mean, it's all about destroying the other side rather than disagreeing with the other side. That's not the kind of America where the First Amendment reigns and people are free to speak, to associate. Today, it's let's destroy everyone who doesn't agree with me.
Yeah. So, couple problems there. He says, look, man, they hate us and they're coming after us just because we say that gay people shouldn't have the same rights as other people, but they're being exclusionary. I'm pretty sure you started it by saying that gay people shouldn't have the same rights to marriage, in some cases adoption, which is now a bill in the state of Georgia. And you argue that we should be able to legally discriminate against gay Americans. So you not being on a board for country music, you'll live, okay, and you'll be okay. And that is a choice that they are making, and they're a private organization and get to make that choice. You, if you get your way, passing laws that discriminate legally against gay Americans, then they don't have a choice. And it's exclusion by definition. Like, oh, they're coming after us and trying to close our institutions down. No, you are literally legally going after gay Americans, and that's what we're trying to prevent.
Yeah, don't play the victim here, bud. Yeah. Like you're saying that others are less than you. Graphic 67, Huckabee, this is in 2010, Huckabee also told college journalists last week that gay people should not be permitted to adopt. Children are not puppies. But on the upside, he thinks gay people should be able to adopt puppies.
Yeah, so don't come around here telling me like, oh, we're all for love. I mean, I'm not gonna let you have the same rights as me, and I'm not gonna let you get married or have kids. How monumentally important is that in people's lives? I'm gonna prevent all of that, but I'm gonna tell you, but I love you, brother. If you would just change everything about your identity, then I would love you. No, I'm not interested in your love.
I feel like it's all also already been litigated. He was on, I don't know if we have enough time for this, it's 15 seconds, nope. If you could, do yourself a favor and go Google Mike Huckabee, Ted Nugent, The Huckabee Show, music performance, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. All right. I want to talk more about the inclusion rider in the postgame as well. tytnetwork.com/join. Rebel headquarters is next. Bye-bye. All right, welcome to Rebel Headquarters. We've got two great guests for you guys. Texas election is tomorrow, so we've got two Texas candidates for you guys. So let's get right to it. Joining us now, Dan Wood. He's running in Texas 5th District, running for what will be Jeb Hanserling's old seat. Good to have you on the program, Dan.
Thanks, Jenks.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about this district and why you're running and obviously how you hope to win. So this is a rare situation for us because usually there's Democratic opponents in the primary, but you don't have any Democrats in your race, right?
No, I was very fortunate to get out early, see a lot of supporters in all parts of this giant congressional district. So I contribute the fact that I don't have an opponent in the primary to the fact that we worked hard, raised some money, got the word out. So we are fortunate to not have an opponent in the primary, and we can focus on our eventual Republican opponent.
All right, so special election for the Young Turks starts tomorrow night, ostensibly, but it begins right now. I am calling Dan Wood's election. He has won the primary. So
that's true.
He'll be up against Republicans. There are 8 Republicans though in your district that are running. Just out of curiosity, Hanserling's a very right-wing congressman. Why is he leaving?
Well, I take him at his word that he just had been there long enough. I'd like to hope that he's going back home to be with his family, as he said, but I'm afraid he may end up on either K Street or Wall Street and try to make a little money. But I don't have anything bad to say about Hanserling other than his policies were horrendous. And after Trump won November the 9th, we all decided that it was time to get off the couch and do something. And so I decided to take on Hanserling. It worked out, though, that he decided to retire. So that really makes this seat winnable for us.
So I assume if that district elected Hanserling, that in the past it has been deeply Republican.
Well, it has been. Demographics have changed. Most of our population in the district has now moved to East Dallas County, who voted 56% for Hillary Clinton in the last presidential election. The district is so diverse from the east to the west. I think I'm well situated, having lived here in the district. I speak like the people in the district. And I really think we've got what it takes. We've got a campaign in place, and I think we've got what it takes to win.
So let me get that right. Is a portion of the district that voted 56% for Hillary, or the whole district?
Just the portion of the district found in Dallas County.
I got you. All right, so there is a significant Democratic component to the district. I understand. But Dan, can you say that you speak like the folks down there, but can you or your family really make a case for having deep roots in the area?
Oh yeah, I've lived and was born in Calton County. Live here now. We live on the family farm that some wood settlers came on to in 1853. So we've been here for many, many generations. I'm not unlike most of the people in the district when you get right down to it. I don't expect people that are full on for Trump to vote for me, but the majority of people that are going to vote in this election are willing to do common sense things to improve life for all of the residents of the Texas 5th District. The things that I've advocated for, such as a living wage, Medicare for all, consumer protection, to name a few.
I was kidding around because I knew your family had been there since 1853. So it was a fun softball. But I just realized the tactic that the Republicans will use against you. Dan Wood's family has been in Texas so long that back then it was almost Mexico.
Well, I think that anybody that would play to a racist point of view that that somehow people from Mexico are not welcome. I don't know if that's what you're getting at, but I just think that all of that aside, there's nothing that I stand for that the majority of people in this district don't stand for, and I truly believe that.
So let's talk about your policies then, because you don't take corporate PAC money, so that's strong and that's bold. But you also have progressive positions, so you're for universal health care. So mainstream Democrats would tell you, no, don't. You're in Hensarling's district. That position is too progressive. So why are you going in that direction?
Well, I live with people that do not have access to doctors. In this day and time, in this country, to not have access to a doctor is just beyond believable. My own wife has insurance through the ACA, of course. She has a pre-existing condition. I've called around to try to find a doctor who takes her insurance in my home county, and so far I've been unsuccessful. The idea that we just can't call and make an appointment and go see a doctor is not right, and I intend to help be part of the solution to improve that so that everyone, no matter their situation in life, can not be fearful about whether or not they can pay for a doctor. And healthcare for all, Medicare for all, eventually a single payer system, those are things that we need to move toward. Yes, we can work on fixing the ACA for now. One of the things that I thought Secretary Clinton was right about was lowering the age to 55 immediately for Medicare recipients. Those are the kind of things that people in my district have to live with every day, and I intend to help them.
Yeah, at this point, I think it's become common sense, but Washington just hasn't caught on, because Beto O'Rourke, also running in Texas, likely to be up against Ted Cruz statewide. His #1 issue is also Medicare for all. So no matter where you are, we all got to live with this system. And in the case of healthcare, literally, if we can manage to live, and it's a matter of life and death for people. And I think fighting for those concerns is no longer left and right. It's people just, they need it. Their family members need it. And then that goes to another issue. You fight for a living wage. So I wanted to get your sense on what you mean by a living wage and how you would fight for it if you were in Congress.
Well, in our district, we don't have a lot of manufacturing jobs. We don't have a lot of high-tech jobs. People in our district work at small businesses, some medium-sized businesses. The wages are so low that a person who works a 40-hour week can't afford to pay rent, buy a car, and pay for his health insurance, pay for his kids to go to school. Minimum wage as it stands now is simply not acceptable. If you work a 40-hour week, you shouldn't have to work at a second job to make a living.
Yeah, and again, since a lot of our politicians now are hooked on that corporate cash, they've lost sight that people that work full time, they want to have a decent wage. It's not that complicated. And running a campaign on that shouldn't be just something that progressives do, but it's one that I think is likely to resonate. So finally, you talk about empowering small business. I know you ran a couple of small businesses, but again, fill that out for me. What do you mean by that?
Well, small businesses are the basic economic engine in our country, and I certainly believe in the profit motive, and I want people to be able to enjoy the fruits of their labor. If people in our district are paid a living wage, they have more money to spend. That just improves the economy for all of us. But the larger picture is our motto, or our slogan in this campaign is a fair shot for all. And from my point of view, that helps everyone. It helps the members of the local chamber of commerce to sell their goods and products to buyers that have the money to pay them. So I don't see that as a problem. But empowering small business owners is certainly something that I intend to try to do. I'm sorry I'm not answering your question exactly, but
yeah. No, I get it. That's an idea as old as Henry Ford. You pay people decent wage, they might actually be able to buy your car.
Right.
And so that helps not just the citizens, but it helps the businesses, and it creates a virtuous cycle. And I love your slogan. If when people ask me what does it mean to be a progressive, sometimes they're surprised, although they shouldn't be, that my number one answer is equality of opportunity for all. It's the core of this country, and it's not too much to ask for.
No, it's not. I have become more and more concerned about the effect of money in Washington, D.C. It's all about who can make a buck every time any law is introduced or any amendments are introduced. Somebody behind it is about the business of trying to make a buck, and it's making a buck on you and me.
Yep.
And I, for a change, am going to represent the people of the 5th District, unlike Hensarling has done for 16 years. His constituencies were on Wall Street, the billionaire class, and so on. It's the people, the everyday people that work for a living in this district that need to be looked after, not banks and billionaires.
Well, you run on that, Dan, and I think you'll win. I want to give everybody the links to help Dan Wood right there, votedanwood.com. You see the donation link, the volunteer link, and whenever we do these interviews and we put them up later on YouTube and Facebook, the links are always down below in the description box on YouTube and in the comment section on Facebook. Dan Wood, running in Texas 5th District, thank you, and let me be the first to congratulate you on your primary win tomorrow night.
Thank you very much.
All right, take care. All right, when we come back, we got another Texas candidate for you guys, also run for Congress, also in a Republican district, and his name is what is interesting and fascinating. His positions are great too, but I'll explain why the name matters so much when we come back. Back on Rebel headquarters. Let's go to our next guest. Joining me now is Sam Johnson. He is running in Texas' 3rd District in a seat that used to be Sam Johnson's. Okay, Sam, let's start there. What in the world's going on?
Well, this is home. The incumbent, he's still in the seat actually, but he's retiring. And yes, we have the same name, but I grew up in this district, and like a lot of people all around the country, I'm sick of sitting around and seeing people take it in the wrong direction. So I'm standing up like so many others to try and turn us back around.
All right. Well, you do have a unique advantage there. There won't soon be any congressman retiring with the name Cenk Uygur, so I don't think I could pull off the same trick. So let's talk about your policies then. What are the priorities that you're fighting for?
Well, like a lot of people, most voters are talking about healthcare right now. That's on everybody's mind. In my district in particular, transportation is a big issue. We're in the fastest growing county in the state of Texas. And then obviously common sense gun reforms are pretty big on everyone's mind right now also.
So let's tackle those one at a time. So when you say common sense gun reform, I'm curious how popular that is down in Texas.
It's pretty popular down here. I think what it really boils down to is everybody wants to be safe, and everybody with children wants their children to be safe. So that's a big conversation. For example, I was at a Moms Demand Action gathering a couple of weeks ago, and they actually had to split the session into 2 different sessions because they had so many people that we had this room full of parents and community members who wanted to talk about how we're going to take action to keep our communities and especially our schools safe. So even down here in Texas, it's a big issue, and it's something people are ready for movement on finally.
And let's get a little bit more specific. So when we say gun reform in Texas in your district, what does that mean?
For me and from the voters I've been talking to, we've got a couple of things. One thing everybody's very responsive to is that Congress really needs to reauthorize and refund CDC research into what's causing this epidemic. And for me, this really it's a public health and a public safety epidemic that we're facing. But there are other things obviously we need to do in the meantime while we conduct that research. I'm calling for an immediate ban on new sales of semi-automatic rifles. So we're not coming to take anything from anyone, but we need to prevent a civilian population from further acquiring these things. We also need to stop the sale of things that allow a shooter to mimic the rapid fire of an automatic weapon, such as bump stocks, such as turrets, such as high capacity clips that allow you to have a much higher rate of firing than a civilian would need.
Got you. Sam, what do you mean by expanding voting rights?
Well, really, we need to augment the Voting Rights Act in a couple of different ways. First off, we need to give it some more teeth so that we're really combating voter suppression. It's happening all over the country. It's happening here in Collin County, where my district is located. So we need to really give the law some teeth so that individuals and legislatures who are doing things to prevent people from really being able to access the ballot so that we can have consequences for them accordingly. But we also need to establish an independent commission to draw district lines so that we have voting districts that are fairly drawn, that are logically drawn. I'm sure you've seen some of the cases from districts originating in Texas where gerrymandering is just run amok. And then, finally, we need to really be looking at what we can do in Texas at the state level to protect voters from those efforts.
You mentioned healthcare. What's your proposal on healthcare?
Well, like a lot of Democrats, I do believe in getting to a Medicare for all system or a Medicare for all type system. But again, that's something that's got to be done deliberately and methodically. We have to keep in mind just the number of employees who work for even just a healthcare billing industry. So it's got to be really carefully done. But also in the meantime, we need to work on reining in health insurance companies and get back to a point where they're actually paying for the claims that people and their doctors agree are medically necessary, and get the health insurance company out of making that decision. We also need to require pharmaceutical companies to give Americans the best price that they give other countries in the world. And in business law, I'm a business attorney by day, or at least I was before I was running for office. We call that a most favored nations clause. And I think it's reasonable to expect pharmaceutical companies to give us the best price they have to give here in the market. And that would include allowing Medicare to negotiate for those prices.
Yeah, that should be a no-brainer, but there's not a lot of brains in Congress right now. There's just checkbooks. So let's talk about other Democrats. How many Democrats are running in the primary tomorrow?
There are 4 of us on my ballot for this seat.
Okay, and why should folks vote for you over the others?
I'm the most qualified to have the seat. I'm the only one who's lived in this district my entire life other than college and law school. My work as a business attorney puts me for the last 10 years working directly with federal law and seeing how these statutes that Congress passes actually come into play in real life on a practical level. And then also outside of that, I've been an advocate in this community for all the different demographic groups that are here, even the ones that I'm not personally a part of. I do a lot with the Anti-Defamation League. So I've been to Austin, I've been to Washington, and I've already worked with legislators on fighting policy and laws that are discriminatory and that, as a result, hurt our economy and hurt the security of our community here.
You know, Sam, I just realized in the general election, having the name Sam Johnson will almost certainly help you. In the primary, it might accidentally not help you. It might go in the opposite direction, go, Sam Johnson's a Democrat now? No, I'm gonna vote for the other guys. Are you a little worried about that?
Yes. Now, we've done a great job reaching as many voters as possible. We've been knocking on doors and making phone calls, and sending out mailers, doing all those things. And we've been working especially hard on that because of the name issue, because there are a lot of Democrats here who have a bad taste in their mouth, but I'm hoping to sweeten that.
Okay. And finally, I wanted to ask you if you think you're the most progressive in the race among the Democrats or not.
That's a great question. I would say I'm as progressive as the other Democrats in this race. You know, we've been to so many candidate forums, and we had one kind of debate. And the issue with doing those is none of us really defer on the substance. And that's why I always come back to the experience, because I know I've got the progressive values. So for me, it's a matter of those other qualifications that make me the best one to go to November and then go to Washington.
All right, sounds good. Here, we'll put up the links here. And again, don't get confused. VoteSamJohnson.com does not go to the current incumbent Republican Sam Johnson. There it goes to the man you're looking at there. So VoteSamJohnson.com, and then you got the donation and the volunteer links. And obviously, those links will be down below when you see this on YouTube or Facebook. All right, Sam Johnson. I didn't think I'd be saying this, but good luck in your race. I never thought I'd be wishing. Yeah, in that district, I never thought I'd be wishing Sam Johnson good luck. So,
well, I'm glad we could change your mind on that one too.
All right, we'll find out tomorrow too. All right, thank you.
That's right. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
No problem. All right, guys, I'm out of time. We got the post game coming up. A couple of excellent topics for you guys. Just a little bit more on Inclusion Rider, an amazing stat about female directors in Hollywood, and then my evolving views on Native Americans throughout my life. I think it's going to make for an interesting conversation. TYTnetwork.com/join to become a member. We'll see you there.